and welcome back to my channel. My name is Rusty, and this is my channel where I talk about my favorite movies, mostly horror, and my favorite music, mostly metal. And tonight, we are going to tackle Cobweb. Now, Cobweb was released in 2023. Yes, you caught me. You caught me. I had not pulled up its page. So it was released in 2023. It was directed by Samuel Bodin. Not Bodin. Bodin. It was written by Chris Thomas Devlin, starring Lizzy Caplan, Antony Starr, and Cleopatra Coleman. Well, go ahead with yourself, Cleopatra. Is that like Cleopatra Jones? I wonder if she was named after Cleopatra Jones. That is totally not the point. So, Cobweb will definitely be on my top 10 horror movies of 2023, which, unlike the year before and the year before that, it was it's going to be very, very difficult. I do have them wrote down for when I do a top 10 show, but unlike previous years, this was a very, very hard list to put together because 2023 just fucking sucked for horror. So I actually had a difficult time with my criteria putting together a top 10 list. I did manage to put together one, but to be completely honest, the top 10 that I have and the couple of honorable mentions are actually just mediocre. Even, there's maybe 3 or 4 out of the top 10 that I consider like really phenomenal. It was a really shitty year for horror to me. So we'll explain all that as we go through it. But yes, Cobweb, released in 2023, will be on that list, and it is legit on the list. It's not mediocre. It's definitely fantastic. I gave it a 9.5 out of 10. I absolutely loved this movie. So we're introduced to Peter going to school, his home life, seeing him asleep. We're introduced to him. He hears knocking in the wall at about 1:45 in the morning, which is not something I would want to hear. He knocks, it knocks back, tells his parents about it. Of course, they blow it off. It's just your imagination, stuff like that. We're introduced to Miss Divine. That's the Cleopatra Coleman. We're introduced to Miss Divine, who is his new teacher. We're introduced to to Brian. Bully Brian. Yes, I just done the Silent Night, so I'm going to have Billy on the brain. But we're introduced to Bully Brian, who bothers him and all of that. Now, interestingly enough, the guy who plays Billy, okay, all right, there it comes. The guy who plays Brian is actually Gary Busey's son, and I didn't know Gary Busey had a son that young. You know what I mean? I mean, how old is Gary Busey? Like 312? Luke Busey? So I didn't know that Methuselah Busey had a son that young. But Luke Busey plays Brian. He's very cool. You can see his daddy. He looks like his daddy before his daddy fucked himself all up. But he looks like his daddy. You can definitely tell that's his son. And yeah, I was a little shocked. I didn't know he had a son that young. But we are introduced to Bully Brian. Who tells him a story about the girl down the lane who went missing? His parents. But how come I didn't write that? Anyway, his parents tell him this story about why he can't go trick-or-treating. Because of a girl that disappeared down the lane who had went missing on Halloween. So, as the nights progress, we hear more knocking and voices. He starts hearing a voice. Dad blames rats. Miss Devine goes to see the parents after he draws a painting in class, he doesn't mean it that way. He was just drawing a scary painting about this voice saying, "Help me." But of course, a teacher is not going to take it that way. She's going to see a terrified child in the bed with "help me" on it and think there's something wrong at the house. So that was completely understandable. She goes to see the parents after that drawing, and the mom ends up confronting him. It's probably about this time that you start thinking these parents are not the good guys, right? So we see the bully, Brian, bust his pumpkin that he had made at school. He tells the voice about it, who tells him to stand up for himself. He ends up going back to school and pushing Billy, who goes down the stairs and breaks his leg. And that was a fucked up scene. He gets in a lot of trouble. He gets put down into the basement and grounded, and it's like, wow, that's a little harsh, isn't it? But like I said, we've determined that these parents are not the good guys. And while he's down there, he sees like this creepy plushie down in the sub-basement. And I'm like, what is it? I mean, you've got a basement and a sub-basement? So I'm like, well, what the fuck is that thing? It was like a pit with a cage on top. You know what I'm saying? It was fucked up. So that definitely piqued your interest. Brian is forced to bring a pumpkin to school, which, I don't think that him and his cousins, I don't think that they would have went and had happened to them what happened to them at the end of this movie had not the parent done that. All I'm saying is that I question that type of humiliation as punishment, making Brian walk through the class with the pumpkin and say sorry to Billy in front of the whole class. I can understand it, but you also need to understand that you could be putting Peter, the victim, in a lot more danger by humiliating the perpetrator like that in front. And that's exactly what happened, right? If you've seen this movie, you know that. So I don't think they would have went there and did what they did had not his mother thought it was a bright idea to humiliate him in front of the class as punishment for being a bully. Does he need punishment? Yes. I'm going on a tangent, I know. But this is what I would have done. Yes, I would have made him replace the pumpkin. Yes, I would have made him apologize to Peter. I would have also given him a gigantic, what the fuck's wrong with you being a bully? Do you want to go to military camp or some shit like that? Because we can play some Child's Play 3 here, and I'll put your ass in military school if you start acting like a punk. Okay? We could do all of that at home. And I could call Peter's parents. I could have him give him the pumpkin and apologize in person on the, at the drop-off zone or something like that. Marching him through class is a little too much because that's what caused him to go after Billy later. And the broke leg. That probably was a little bit of the revenge too. So they're grounded him in the basement. The principal talks to Miss Devine and kind of tells her about how wrong she is for having gotten that deeply involved. Peter sees the weird plushie in the sub-basement. The teacher looks up information about that missing girl. She ends up going again to the house, is invited in, and I tell you, that was an uncomfortable bunch of scenes right there. with Peter kicking on the door and the mom, freaking out on her and shit like that. They let him off grounding, and she brings him those weird cupcakes. You can tell that bitch is crazy. Of course, it's all understandable at the end. But he tries to make contact. The voice warns him to be careful about that the parents were evil. He wants to see her. She says she's been in there too long and it may scare him, but finally agrees. He finds a hole. She tells him about a hole behind the wallpaper where you get to see like this weird eye and shit that kind of scares you. So she comes up with a plan after telling him that she's his sister and the parents have hurt her and locked her in there, that she had to wait for him to get big enough so that he could move the clock that hides the door and to help her escape and leave the dark and leave the wall, and that mom and dad are evil and that your time is coming. So she trying to kind of convinces him that they are going to do something to him as well. So he has this really fucked up super nightmare. The voice, I guess, wants to prove that what she's saying is true. So she has him go and dig up in the garden, the pumpkin garden in the backyard, which he does do, and he finds a skull. Of course, the truth is the parents didn't kill that person. She killed that person, but we'll get to that too. So that's the little girl that disappeared. So he finds the skull, covers it back up. Oh, she claims that the reason that that girl was killed was because that she asked for help from a trick-or-treater, and that on Halloween, and then that's when she was put in the wall after they killed the one who had saw her. So that's the lie that she tells him, because it was her that killed that girl, not the parents. They just covered it up, and probably were covering up for themselves, for having hid this. Well, boy, I'm just hop skipping and jumping right on ahead, aren't I? But he sees the hole in the wall and freaks. The mom, because she jumps his ass again and sees that hole, and now she knows her secret is blown. So when the dad comes home, so the dad does come home. You're all really nervous and anxious, and you don't know what's going to happen. He has him bury all of these pumpkins with, these diseased black rock pumpkins. Obviously, they had dug up the body. And, for a second there, you thought maybe the dad was fixing to kill him. So the movie was really good at kind of working you up. We see Brian show up with his older cousins. Revenge is planned. We then see them having dinner, where that was a fucked up scene when they realized that Peter, because I was shocked, that Peter has just poisoned them. He poisoned them with rat poison. He basically killed both of his parents. And you're like, okay, I did not see that coming. I didn't see that coming. And that it was very, very tense, when the dad screaming, call 911 and all of that kind of stuff. And then do people really vomit like that when they've been poisoned with rat poison? Because that was a fucking gross, painful death. And then his mother chases him with a knife. And then starts puking and, all that stuff. He takes the keys from his mom's body. But she pops awake for her last moments, which was "Don't let her out," was her final words. He goes to the clock, he opens that thing and realizes just what a fuck up he has done. He hears this laughing, and it comes out of the room. The way they did the creature was very, very interesting, because that thing was, I don't know what the fuck that thing was, and still don't know what the fuck that thing was. I even went and looked up, how you go to Google and you're like, Cobweb ending explained, and go to forums to see what other people's opinions were. Fucking nobody knows what that damn thing was. Exactly. I mean, they know it was their kid, and they know that's his sister, but what is it exactly? A deformity that was then allowed to become an even more deformed thing as it lived in the wall. It's fucked up. So, Brian shows up, plus his cousin, and either 3 cousins or 3 other boys show up with him. They open up the front door. They go in where it's all vandalized. They're looking for Peter. They start vandalizing the place, like I said. The creature gets one, which is pretty good. Brian ends up seeing the dead mom underneath the crawl space in the stairs. We see the second one gotten. It gets it gets Brian, and then the 4th one's down. That scene where it was throwing that guy up against the wall, and then it went into the room one more time, and then it come out without a head. That was fucked up. That was fucked up. So the thing is after them. Miss Devine is on the way. The creature tells him the origin, about how she was born, and then the dad made a pit, which is what that sub-basement was. Then it made a cage, while I learned in the wall how to live, how to move, and all of this kind of stuff. And its hair had never been cut the whole time. The situation is fucked up. It was very shocking to the senses, this situation. Especially since you don't know what that fucking thing is. It then locks him in the wall. Miss Devine actually does show up and ring the bell. Goes in, tries to call 911, but she gets that thing, jumps her legs. She, of course, sees all the bodies. She finds Peter, and she goes into Peter's room and sees his hand in the wall, because he's screaming for her to get out, which is very brave of him, I guess. She ends up going to the hole, and she starts busting the wall down so that he can get out. They end up getting outside the front door, and that creature jerks Peter back inside, which was pretty cool. Puts him in that pit in the basement. The sister tells him, she claims she was just born that way, because you don't get to see it a lot of the creature, but it had that big long Joker face smile with the jagged teeth and those eyes, and what kind of deformity is that? You know what I mean? Because they don't answer a lot of questions in this movie, and usually that would be irritating, but she says that she was just born that way. Miss Devine comes back in. The sister confronts Miss Devine. Peter pulls on her hair and gets up. He manages to get up out of that pit by crawling up her hair, pulling her over, and they end up locking her in there. And then, supposedly, they walk off, and the movie ends with Peter obviously having nightmares and hearing an overdub of the sister's voice that she'll always be with him. Now, you'll assume, of course, that once they got out, she called 911. So you can imagine that they probably came and they got that creature and put her somewhere safe. Obviously some kind of mental institution or, well, yeah, that would go without saying, especially after she just cut up those 4 boys. But Peter, I mean, I guess you wouldn't get in a lot of trouble. You would definitely, because he had this thing teaching her or tricking him into murdering his parents. So I'm sure all that would have came out in trial because he's obviously in a new home, but he's still having to deal with the trauma. And it probably will haunt him for the rest of his life, especially the fact that he murdered his own parents under her trickery. The parents, they're really hard to figure out, you know. Maybe they were so freaked out by this. I know in one of the scenes, the girl says, when you were born, they were so happy. When I was born, they screamed. Which, yeah, I imagine so. It's like, what did you do? You just gave birth to It's Alive? You know? You'd had to see that movie. So, although there are a lot of unanswered questions, it's interesting. You know, what was she? Obviously, she was born very deformed. Something was so ashamed that they put her in there, but yet at the same time she looked very monstrous, like supernatural or something. I don't know of any kind of deformity that I've ever seen that would explain her appearance. So what was she? Obviously these parents just locked her in the wall. I guess that little door is how they feed her or something. Like I said, a lot of questions. You can't just sit. I was just sitting here daydreaming about it, like trying to come up with some answers. But that's good. That's what's good about this movie. So yes, that was Cobweb. If you haven't seen it, please let me know what you think about it. It will be on my top 10, probably in the top 5 of the year. Well, yes, it will definitely be in the top 5. It's just amazing movie. Made me jump several times. Had me very, very engaged. And kudos to all of the actors, but, you know, kudos to old Busey's son there. He played a good little bully. Peter was great. The mom and dad were very, very sufficiently creepy. And Miss Cleopatra, she was good too as the teacher. Great cast, great story. Left a lot of it open. I don't know. Would you consider it open for a sequel? It could be. We'll have to see. Good old Lionsgate strikes again. But at least, hey, they put out good physical media, digital copies, everything. So, I do love Lionsgate. Lionsgate is pretty good. They got a lot of good movies. Cobweb, 2023 will definitely be on the list. Love you, miss you, bye-bye. Always remember, never forget. You're a very, very special person. Even if you're not a deformed little psycho that your parents have hidden in the wall. Or her brother, who murders your own parents because you're so gullible. Well, he was only 8. Still, that takes some balls. Kill your parents with rat poison, but in 2023, not really unusual. So what makes these horror movies is like, oh please. You can go through the crime shows on YouTube and find a lot worse than any horror movie that's come out. That's probably why horror movies aren't as effective anymore. Real life is scarier. Love you, miss you. Bye-bye. On that note, Merry Christmas.